Welcome to the video lecture series, Culture, Worldview, and Origins. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. This series, we're starting anew. This is number one, the first video lecture in the series of the origin of man, according to the non-Western biblical parameters. This whole series has been built off of a quote by Stephen Jay Gould, a biologist, scientist, and that I had been struggling with the concept of how to discern different scientific models. I wasn't interested in the debate, in the belittling, in the emotional part of getting into different scientific models, and I was looking for a way to understand how to analyze, how to understand the different models that are presented out there, how to understand where the different scientists or philosophers or educators are coming from. What tools can I use to understand that? And this is what I think I found through research and through Stephen Jay Gould's writings. He, being a scientist, still said, first, facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way by all reasonable people. So in other words, we can still be considered reasonable people and not be in agreement as to how the facts are understood or how they're interpreted. Then he goes on to say, and this is why, because theory, habit, prejudice, and culture all influence the facts we choose to observe and the way in which we perceive them. So in other words, he lists 4 different factors that influence the process of getting data, of understanding. We come to the world with our questions, with wondering why it's this way, how is it that way, what is going on, and we're seeking answers, and those answers are then given to us by an expert in that field of study, and that expert then studies the world, studies all the data that is available, and then gives us the conclusion. And what I now understand is that conclusion that is given is a conclusion that is personal to that interpreter, to that scientist, to that philosopher, to that theologian, to whoever is there that is wearing those glasses, that is interpreting the data for me. He is and she is interpreting the data according to a standpoint. And that's what we've gone over in the other series on worldview, is that a worldview, before you can view the world, you have to have a picture of the world, which is the Weltbild. And then once you have a picture of the world, and that is through all of our experiences, through our culture, our context, our belief system, everything that exerts a pressure upon us that gives us a picture of the world, then through that picture of the world, we view the world. And that's the worldview. And that's what we have here, is that, and that's what Stephen Jay Gould is saying, is that culture, theory, and habit, and prejudice all go into those glasses to give a tint to the interpretation process. And therefore, that's why he says that facts do not come to us as objective items seen in the same unambiguous way by all reasonable people, is because there are factors that go into the interpretation process, and that is what interested me, and that's what got me into understanding the different scientific models and trying to understand the nuances and the different standpoint, the different rules, the different methods, what is the differences between all the different scientific models, and how can I distinguish them? And so building off of this, of what we had, and because of 25 years of experience of living and teaching cross-culturally, I understood culture and how culture exerted a strong influence upon the dynamic of perception, of understanding, and of learning. And so this here I identified with the what Stephen Jay Gould was saying is that even as scientists, they do not come to the objects that are being studied neutrally. You can't. You have to bring a system. You have to bring your grid of how to understand what you're looking at, how to choose what you're going to look at, and how you interpret it. And so hermeneutics is actually a big science. The science of hermeneutics, science of interpretation, is a big field even within the science realm. So that is what we've been looking at, is these glasses. Now those glasses are used to construct, or that those factors that are in the glasses, those 4 factors are used to construct a thinking and a perceiving process. And this is the house that we've put together, starting with ground zero, which is the culture, the cultural perspective, the ground zero, which would be the Weltbild. And that is all the personal experiences, that is the personal standpoint, that is the immediate context, cultural context, the family, the community, and that all forms a picture, a world picture. Then through that world picture, we choose a source of reliable knowledge. And we must choose between the different sources that are available, and what we've said before, and we're going to hit it again just in a minute, is the 4 sources of reliable knowledge that is out there. Basic beliefs come out of the reliable knowledge. Basic beliefs then form in what Stephen Jay Gould would say is our prejudice or our prejudging, which includes our philosophical system, whether we choose to be philosophical naturalists, which means closed system, or we choose to be a philosophical, what would be the other? I don't want to go with supernaturalist, because or just open system, creator. And so that is our prejudice, and it's a personal prejudice. Then from that prejudice, we implement a theory. A theory is basically built off the Greek term theorum, which is spectator, to look at. How we look at things is our theory. So we look at things through the theory of creation science, evolutionary science, intelligent design, theistic evolution. And so each one has a method and a theory of perspective of looking at things. Then you have your model of science. That's what I've just gone over, is different models of science. And then through the model of science, it produces a habit of looking at the world and understanding the world through that lens. So what we're doing is we're going into now the origin of man, and we're looking at the origin of man through non-Western biblical parameters. And it's important to emphasize that, because we can look at biblical parameters through a Western standpoint, which changes then how to interpret the biblical parameters. What we're going to try to do is try to reconstruct the original context, which was non-Western. And so the non-Western, how does that differ from our Western? Well, the non-Western, number one, is the universal domain, is that the non-Westerners have a universal domain that is occupied by the Creator and that which is created, with the 2 colons there, which means there's a fluid movement between the Creator and that which was created. And so it's not a division of which in my Western world would be natural and supernatural, because those are not, in the non-Western, there is nothing natural. Everything was created by the spirit world, and the spirit world is dominating and controlling the natural or the physical world. So there is no natural world, if that means the exclusion of supernatural. And that leads us to point number 2, is that matter and spirit. How do they handle matter and spirit as non-Western? Well, again, it's spirit first two colons, and matter. It's one unified domain. And so within that one domain, there is a spirit world, which includes God, which includes the Creator, and it includes all the spirits created, and they are within the same domain. There's not a separation like we can separate between material world and spiritual dimensions. They do not make that separation. Number 3, the universal operating system. What is their system like? Okay, what that means is that is their system, their whole world, the way it functions, is it an open system, meaning that the spirits, the Creator, the gods have influence within that system? Or is the system closed like the Western world does? It closes the system to practice science. It says it is a closed system. There is no divine influence in or out, and therefore it is uniform. It is uniformitarianism, which means all causes are uniformly natural and all effects will be uniformly from the cause natural. And therefore, after observation, we can predict, or we can apply the same results, extrapolating forward or backwards, because it's a closed system and it will always be that way. Whereas in the non-Western, it's an open system. You cannot predict forward nor backwards, and nor is it just physical processes. They are very much in sync with the spiritual world, and they take the spiritual world with them wherever they go 24/7. And so if they're going hunting, they ask for the blessing of the spirit that is over the hunting. Or if they're going to go fishing, or if they'll ask for the permission from the spirit of the rivers, and then the chopping down of trees, the spirit of the trees of the forest. And so to them, to the non-Western, the spirit world is very much predominant. It's more dominant than the physical world. So their operating system is open, and it is not governed by natural laws. There's no such thing as natural. There's processes, but those processes can be and are controlled by spiritual forces, whether it be God or the created other power sources. They are believers. Okay, number 4 is the external authority. Because they believe in this spiritual dimension, they submit to it. They know they're under it. They don't have those powers. And so they are external authority driven, which means that they don't have the authority or the power to make decisions that would affect others. They are very dependent and cooperative within their community, so very community driven. So those are the domain, or the different non-Western cultural tendencies that are incorporated into this thinking pattern when you're talking about biblical parameters through that thinking pattern, which means they believe in spirits, they believe in the spirit world, they believe in miracles. And so that is a very different standpoint from many of us that would try to understand the scripture from a Western perspective. Again, what would be the source of reliable knowledge? Well, in philosophy, there are 4 recognized major sources of reliable knowledge, and one is intuitive. But intuitive means inside of me. And so I just know it, I feel it. And so intuitive is connected with the feelings, and can't really explain it, but I know that this is right. Okay, a non-Westerner would not really go that way because they don't make internal decisions based on what they feel or what is like. Number 2, authoritarian knowledge. That means outside. Authority knowledge is outside, and that is what a non-Westerner would tend to set up as an authority, is outside. That outside authority can be an image, it can be a person, it can be a book, a document, it can be a lot of things external to that person. So in this case, we're doing biblical. So the external knowledge can be revealed. Authority knowledge includes revelation, so that includes scripture. Since it's an open system, there can be revealed knowledge. Now, a lot of Westerners, even Christians, they have a closed system, which now when you apply logic to that as a closed system, you cannot have revealed knowledge. in a closed system. So Scripture then is not regarded as a reliable source because it is not inspired. So authoritarian knowledge is what is the source of knowledge. The source of reliable knowledge is an outside revealed source. Okay, logical knowledge. Logical has to do with the human-centered within the human mind. The other one, intuition, is the human soul, the human feelings. Illogical now is the human mind. And so is it the human thinking processes that would be the source? Not in this case, no. It would go back to number 2. Number 4, empirical knowledge. Okay, that is still now within the human, but it's through the senses, through perception. And so is that a source of reliable knowledge? And again, no, it's based on number 2, which is the authoritarian. But those are the 4 general categories recognized as sources of reliable knowledge to choose from. What is your source? Okay, we're building the house, and we earlier had the house projected. Now we're amplifying and just starting at the foundation level. This is what we're starting with. Again, the symbols there mean grounded circuit. Those are from the housing industry or plans. And they use those symbols to indicate a grounded circuit. So this house is grounded into the Weltbild, which is the culture, the experiences, the personal experiences that individual has. It's an individual standpoint. So point 0 is ground zero, which is a non-Western cultural tendency. On top of that non-Western cultural tendency, we have the foundation of the house that we're building, and that is what is our source. Number 1 is a external. It's biblical. It's revealed knowledge. So the source is external from me. It is revealed because it's open system, and that's what goes to open system now. So that is the characteristic of this house, which is very different from a Western house, a radical Western house, which would be internal, no revealed, human logic, closed system. So you can see how the foundations are different. And so that's what we're just keep going over, is to understand that whatever we read, whatever we look at, whatever we consult for an authority, that authority or that reading, that scientist, that philosopher, that theologian is all coming from a standpoint. And we must recognize, are we in agreement, or understand how that standpoint produces what conclusions he has come to or she has come to. And so anyway, that's the whole objective of this series, is to understand, is to be able to discern where somebody is coming from and be able to know that is why they say that, because this is where they're coming from. I would like Richard Dawkins, he wants to convince me that the Darwinian worldview is true, and I would like to convince you that the biblical non-Western worldview is true, and that we have to assume what is true. And so do we base our assumptions of what is true on human reason and logic, or on revealed truth of what God has revealed through His Word? Okay, this is the house again. Coming back to it, we are building up, and each stage, each pillar is a very personal choice that we make. And those personal choices that we make are influenced by our culture, ground zero. And so again, you can go back to the earlier lectures on origins, on the Western thinking, the Western science, the non-Western science, and to see how this house comes together and how each step is taken, but each step is really a product of the previous decisions already made. And so you can't, and the house needs to be coherent. It needs to be, in other words, the basic beliefs have to come from the source. reliable source. The reliable source produces basic beliefs. The basic beliefs produces a system of thought, which would be a philosophical system. That philosophical system produces then methods of how to get to truth. Those methods will then produce a model, a scientific model or economic model or political model of how to put into practice those previous steps and beliefs. So what we're trying to do is just trying to show that this house needs to be stable, it needs to be coherent, it needs to stay within the parameters of the foundation that is holding the whole structure up. Again, we're Tim and Holly Nyquist. If you'd like to communicate with us, you can find us at doubleroadrover.com or at thn.academia@gmail.com. Thanks again for joining me. This is Origin of Man from Non-Western Biblical Parameter, lecture number 1. We have a number of them to go through, 5 of them to be exact, and so hope to see you in the next one. Thanks again.